Hello everyone, welcome to A Song Like Alice. This is a workshop series which is being presented by ACCC Community Radio in collaboration with MusicNT and with support from APRA AMCOS Music Grants. Today we have our presenter Benny Colin Grams, who will be presenting the workshop Find Your Sound. This is one of many workshops and we're hoping to have one a month throughout the rest of this year. With different people from the local music industry sharing knowledge and skills relating to songwriting and also broader music industry things. So keep an eye on future stuff. A big thank you to Red Hot Arts for hosting us today. If you haven't been here before, there's bathrooms over yonder, and if there is a fire or an emergency, we can head straight out the front. I think you've all filled out one of the registrations for the building and also the workshop, so a big thank you. One of the reasons that we have a big microphone and speaker system and such forth, it's about sound, but we're also recording this workshop so that people that can't make it here today can watch it later. And we also have a remote Zoom session, and we have one guest joining us remotely, so thank you for being with us. So when people do ask questions, if you're comfortable, we'd really love it if you could use the microphone. Stick your hand up and I'll run it to you, and that just means that people watching back later will be able to hear your question and be able to share and benefit from that as well. Otherwise, Benny will probably repeat that back. If anyone doesn't want to be on film, it's probably not the best workshop, but do let me know afterwards and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, so thanks everyone for coming, and we'll hand over to Benny for tonight's session of A Song Like Alice.
Cool, thank you. Before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Aranda people. I just want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Hi, I'm Benny. If we haven't met before, I do a fair bit of sound around town. I've been making music for about 5 or 6 years and playing music since I was about 10. Started playing guitar, started playing in bands when I was like 17, 18. And then slowly moved into electronic music, and that's generally what I make and write today. So, as a quick introduction of what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to first go over Ableton Live, just give you a quick tour, because this is the digital audio workstation or DAW that I prefer to use. But everything that I'm doing today, I think can be translated pretty easily into any DAW, like whether you're using Logic or Pro Tools or anything like that. And I'm gonna use all of the stock instruments and plugins and stuff that comes with Ableton. Once we've done that, we'll do a little bit of an introduction to synthesizers and making electronic sounds. Then we'll move on to maybe some field recordings using found sounds, and then moving into sampling, probably chop ups and drum breaks. And then just have a general chat about experimentation tactics, and just, I guess, trying to think of ways to create an original tone or original sound. So I like to think of making music as a kind of stage-based venture. The first one being research and development. So if you have a sound or a particular genre that you're thinking about making, kind of, listening to artists that you like or songs that you like, trying to work out which parts that you like. Is there any particular sounds or the way that they kind of create their songs? The next is creating and collecting sounds, so like kind of building a library. And the way that I like to do it is just spend maybe weeks or a month just purely creating sounds, like not even putting it into like a songwriting mental state, and then just having this huge bank of sounds or samples that you can then pluck out and arrange in a particular way. And then that kind of moves on to the experimenting side. So you're trying to find out what works well together. Obviously some samples are going to sound harsher or softer, and depending what type of track you want to make. And then there's actually writing the music, which is something that I'm not really going to touch on too much today, because I think it's been spoken about previously in some of these talks. And then I might, if we have time, quickly touch on a bit of mixing, and because I think like finding your sound, like mixing your track is also a big thing in how you sound. Like if you like to emphasize the kick drum because you love kick drums, then you're going to be known as like a percussion artist or something like that, I guess. Okay, so does everyone use a DAW here, or has anyone not used a DAW? When I say DAW, I mean a program like Ableton Live, Logic Pro, Pro Tools. Or is everyone pretty familiar with some sort of... No, that's cool. No, yeah, that's fine. No worries, just wanted to get a quick idea. So yeah, there's obviously heaps of different DAWs out there. I prefer to use Ableton Live because when I was experimenting around with different DAWs to find out which one I wanted to use, I just thought that this, like the workflow just made sense to me in my brain. I did try a bunch. I tried Pro Tools and Logic and all that type of stuff, but I've just thought this one was the best. And there's also, like I always seem to be constantly learning with this program, and you always find something new. But obviously it is, like Ableton, I'm going to be using the suite, and it is quite expensive, so obviously it's not as accessible. But they do have different tiers if you were interested in using Ableton Live after this talk. Okay. So so why should you learn a DAW is a question that I wanted to ask. Does anyone have any ideas of why DAW-based production would be better? No. Well, I think that learning a DAW is a huge benefit to even if you're just an acoustic singer-songwriter, or you play normal folk or like folk instruments. Like being able to navigate and quickly put down ideas into your computer is like a huge benefit, because like you can quickly pull up demos, or you can work on tracks whenever you like. It really kind of, or definitely for me, it helped me like really cement a lot of fundamental music knowledge, like a bit of theory, learning the frequency spectrum, and just general like songwriting. Do I have to turn that up a bit now? Cool. Okay, so maybe let's start off with a listening exercise. I'm going to play a track by a guy who is called Max Cooper. And I chose this track because I thought it was quite an extreme example of the type of things that we're going to be making today. And then I can also tell you how he has crafted his sound and put together his sounds. Let me find it. So everyone just have a listen and see if you can pick out any samples or any particular pieces that you recognize. pretty much carries on that same idea for the rest of the track. Does anyone have ideas of what they heard, what they think the samples were or synth sounds? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Cody. Yeah, definitely that rain built up that initial percussive thing, the voice.
Yep.
Sounded like maybe a cough or something there in that last 10 minutes, or last 20 seconds, like a
Yeah.
trying to create a 808 snare sound or something with a guttural, throatal thing. Yeah, nice bass. It's a nice track.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I thought it was a can rolling along the road at the start, and then I liked how it was kind of random sound that kind of moved into more an actual beat that progressed. Yeah, that was good.
Definitely.
And then there was some different samples of voice and the thumb piano as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the synths came in a bit later on.
Yeah, for sure. Nailed it. Anyone else?
Yeah, I thought I heard wind chimes at some point, and during like the build, I thought it was like maybe like static from a TV or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's pretty close.
Maybe those like wine glasses, people they just round the glass and it makes like some wowie sound. I'm not sure, but yeah, and obviously some glass clinging as well.
Yep.
I reckon.
I thought I heard an omnisphere bell at the very start.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Sounded like somebody was trying to get the last chips out of the bottom of the packet, and then they spilled it on the ground, and someone got the vacuum cleaner out. And
Could have well have been. Well, the ones that I know for sure is there's definitely the raindrops recorded at the start. So they I think they were hitting on his tin roof of his house. So he got the microphones out and recorded that. And they did, so like it sounds kind of random and sporadic at the start, but then it does slowly start to become a bit more of a rhythm. He did play like the kalimba and I think it's a sansula, is like the little finger piano thing that was those main plucks. And then the vocal snippets are from a vocalist he's worked with before called Catherine DeBoer. And all those, once the kind of main drop had happened, I think we all could have been right in what he used there. He really does uses a lot of like car doors closing and, chip packets on the floor. What I'm trying to get at is that like all of those little sound design elements are probably those things. And that's probably just from like a lot of time of actually like developing and recording sounds and chopping them up and then having his big library to then pluck away and then use it as he wishes. So let's move into some sound design. Let's do a quick tour of Ableton first. So for those of you who haven't used Ableton before, this is your main screen. Here are all your channels. I've already got mine preset. One channel looks after MIDI, the other is audio. I don't have an audio one on here, but there's an audio channel. Here you have your clips. These are mostly used when you're in a live performance, so you can trigger these clips that are mainly like loop-based stuff. And if you want to create something in that clip, you just double-click, and then it brings up your piano roll. Unless you have a predefined instrument or sampler in that channel, then it will give you a different result. For example, if you have a drum rack in the drum rack, it's going to give you this. Over here, I like to look at this as your toolbox. Sounds, these are all just pre-stock sounds that you get when you buy, download, crack Ableton, however you've done it. Not that I endorse Crack's software, but you've got to do what you've got to do sometimes. And then, so yeah, sounds, drums, instruments. Here is where we're going to be mostly. We're going to be looking at these synthesizers. So analog, electric, operator, simpler, and wavetable are going to be the ones that we're looking at. Audio effects, these are everything from EQ to compression to overdrive, reverb, and everything in between. MIDI effects relates directly to MIDI instruments, so you can't use MIDI effects on an audio channel. Max for Live is a great tool that I really love using, and unfortunately it's only available in the suite, but Max for Live is where people who enjoy making their own devices, such as synthesizers and stuff, make their own, and you can purchase, download, buy any of those. And there's a huge community of people making these really niche products that you can use in your own productions. Plugins, third-party plugins, such as other synthesizers, channel strips, etc. And then your own little folders, like this is my folder just full of drum breaks. If you hit tab, you go into your session view, which is where I normally kind of compose the track, but we're not going to really be digging too far in here today. We're just going to stay in the session view. And then these two channels on the right are just your effects returns, or sends and returns. And then just the master bus. So that's pretty much the overview of it. Yep. Oh, the filing system. I was going to get into that later, but I can quickly touch on that now. Wait, can you go back to the question? Sorry. Should I answer that now? I don't know. I feel like I'm going to forget about it if I don't. Okay, I'll just answer it now. So criteria... Wait, go back again, sorry. The criteria when searching for a sample or a sound in a session. I guess it's kind of whatever you're feeling at the time when you want to write. A lot of the time I'll either, if I've got my library of sounds, I'll just scan through and see what I just like at the time, and then I will then build the track based on that first original choice. There's no, say if I've chosen a really soft pad sound, I'm not going to choose another soft pad sound. I'm going to try and add little bits and pieces to make it a bit different. And then file structure is mostly just my favorites. I haven't got all my files because this is a new computer. I haven't brought them all over properly yet. So yeah, it's a feeling. Got to capture the feeling.
There's different language like pads and different words that might describe different sorts of sounds.
Mm-hmm.
How do you organise your sounds so you can find them?
I use a naming convention that makes sense to me. So I could be, if I've got, I've got a few projects going on that are quite different in genre. My naming convention could be Emperor _ pad _ the key that the pad was recorded in, C#, and then 1, and then pad C#2, etc., etc. So it just kind of makes, you make a naming convention up that works for you. But that is like sample management and file management is a huge part of this kind of process. It's very easy just to lose yourself in an abundance of sounds and not really have any structure. And it's also something that you should probably spend like maybe an hour a week on just like organizing it again. Was there any other questions? Just while we're cool. Okay, so synthesizers. There's a couple of types. So the main two are analog or digital. There's a lot of arguments between what's better. I think we're at a point now where digital is just as good as analog, and I think it's just personal preference at this point. I think the sound quality is like pretty identical. You've got to have wizard ears to be able to tell the difference a lot of the time. Hardware versus software. I'm going to be using just software today. I've got a few hardware synths at home, and that's also just a matter of personal preference, I think. Like I really like, because I'm a guitar player, and that's the first instrument I learned. I like tactile things, so I find that I can kind of get more involved in the sound design process when I use a hardware synth. And I feel like every synthesizer kind of works in exactly the same way. They just do things differently or in their own way. Like the main type of synthesis is subtractive, where you're just adding bits and pieces or taking things away. There's frequency modulation, where you are affecting another sound source with the sound source. There's wavetable, which is one that I'm going to be doing most of the demonstrations on, just because I think is laid out really well, and it's really easy to explain what I'm doing. And then there's granular, and then there's also modular, when you see those guys with big rigs and they're just plugging cables in, or girls. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a wavetable into here, and we'll do a quick tour of wavetable. I'll just make this bigger. Okay, so in this little box here, this is our oscillator 1, and an oscillator creates a sound wave. So at the moment, we've just got a solid sine wave. Let me just see if I've... Oh, it has. Bear with us, internet people, the screen is just frozen. Also, if you are listening online, I'd probably recommend putting on headphones at this point. Just might be able to hear it a bit better. Yeah, okay. Should we just do this? Yeah, you do that while I do it. Okay. Okay, so as we slowly glide through these sound waves, the timbre and texture is going to change. So now we're moving into a triangle, sawtooth, and a square or pulse width. So these 4 sound waves are stock standard in almost every single synth ever built. From here, we have our filter section. In Wavetable, you've got 2 filters that you can activate at the same time. But this one is just a low pass filter or high pass, and then high pass filter. And that just tames the high and low frequencies of your sound. Your envelopes are here. An envelope is a system where, how do I explain it? An envelope is how affects how a certain part of the synth is going to behave. So, for example, the amp envelope refers to amplitude, which is just another word for volume. So, when you trigger a sound, this is how it's going to react. And the way it works is it has a thing called an ADSR, the attack, decay, sustain, and release. So at the moment I've got a very sharp attack, which is 0 milliseconds. So there's almost no attack. And then as I slowly drive it across, it's very slowly gonna not have that initial like click sound. If we bring the decay and the sustain up, it's gonna have this almost kind of longed sound. So when I take my hand off the pad, it's just gonna go on for ages. And then as I pull it back, it's gonna go away. So this really helps in like when you're gonna first start designing a sound, like what are you gonna make? Like are you gonna make a kick drum, or are you gonna make a pluck, or a pad? A pad is kind of like a synthesized string sound, or like a kind of background evolving like solid sound. Your other envelopes, so as the
Okay. I was going to fix that. Sorry, everyone. I'm just, Donna is watching remotely, and we're just going to try and get the screen share back up. Just restart that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Do I need to reconnect to the LAN? Sorry, guys.
First step of sound design is making your system work and then fixing it periodically as it continually breaks or does unexpected things.
Move out the way. Okay, so on this particular synthesizer, you've got another 2 envelopes, and you can assign these to different parts of the synth, which we'll get into later. Your LFO is a low frequency oscillator, which you can assign to give movement, or assign to different parts of the synthesizer to make other things move for you, which I'll explain by actually making a sound. So, let's make a sound. I've got a simple chord progression here, and as I start like manipulating the sound, I'll explain what I'm doing, so what I've just described is going to make a lot more sense. Okay, so I want to make a pad sound. So I think that a sine wave is probably a bit too thick and doesn't have like any overtones whatsoever, which is something that's a bit more desirable for a pad. So I'm just going to scan through. That's probably a bit too much. So maybe like somewhere here. Might be a bit better. Okay, so a pad, I don't want any attack or hardly any attack whatsoever. So I'm just going to drag this slowly across until it reaches a point where I think is a bit nicer. And I'm going to bring the decay and sustain up a bit more. So it's not going to dip as much as after it's hit its peak of the attack. And then I'm going to give it a bit of release so it kind of molds over the last chord. Okay. So now I'm going to maybe I'll bring the other oscillator in. So I'll choose my second one. So now you can hear there's a bit of a ring over the top. Kind of the same thing. I don't quite want the full sine wave. Maybe it can go a bit more buzzy. And what I can do is I can bring down the volume of this oscillator so it's not quite taking over as much as the first one. So now I'm getting really sick of that really buzzy sound, so I'm going to bring the filter down. And maybe give it a bit of resonance. So that's a bit nicer to listen to now. So now I'm going to move into the modulation section, and the modulation section is so this is where you can tell the synth to do things for you. And I think that's the easiest way to explain it. So for example, I could move this filter like this. Oh, sorry. So I could move the filter like this with my finger, and I think that sounds pretty nice, and I think that's a good attribute for a pad sound. Or I can tell one of my LFOs or one of my envelopes to do it for me. So let's just see which one works the best. So now this LFO here, in this pattern, at the speed, is now moving it for me. So now I can change the rate of the LFO, so it's a bit slower. I can also tell it how far I want it to go, like how deep or how shallow. So I think that sounds pretty nice. Another good thing about wavetable, which I think is really powerful, is you can tell these LFOs or these envelopes to move the oscillator shape for you. So, for example, I'm going to go to oscillator 1 position, which is this here, the position of where the oscillator sits. And I'm going to say, you move as well. And I can do the same for this one. But this time I'm going to use a different speed. I'm going to tell LFO 2 to move oscillator 2. So LFO 2, oscillator 2. Does anyone have any questions so far? Is this all making sense, or is... Yes. So you can, when you're, yeah, you can. Is the short answer. Yeah, hang on, I think there's a mic coming.
Okay, my question was, can you put it onto a write mode, as in you're writing the pattern in real time, and then it records what you've done and plays that back? And Benny said yes. And then I said, okay, is this kind of like a shortcut way or an easier way, because what you'd write is probably most likely going to look like this?
Yeah, so we're kind of just building the foundation of a sound at the moment. The way to do that would be, like the way that's done in Ableton is you use modulation and automation. So in the same way that we're telling the synth to control itself, if we go into the session view, we can go example. Like as we record it, you can then draw in where you want it to move, such as volume and things like that. But for the point of this purpose, I'm just going to make the sound just using the synth itself.
And that's like better at this stage of the process, because you kind of just need something stable or like predictable at this point, because it's still so early in the piece. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it's just like you're getting a foundation sound that you can save and then come back to and then change. So you can kind of, like, as I was saying, like when you're building your sounds and you've made a bunch of different pad sounds with different textures and stuff, if you then want to use that sound, you can just drag it in straight away and you know exactly what you've got or what you've made. Okay. Any other questions? Does that answer your question?
Yep. Cool. So what you're doing here is just like going and recording a sample, except you're creating a sound to you. So you'll put this sound you make here in a bank.
Yeah, pretty much. Or you can then resample it or use it straight as it is in your song.
Yeah. You know? Where would you save it to once you've got your sound? I suppose we'll get there, won't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. No worries.
But yeah, like the main thing I'm trying to get at with creating this is, yeah, like you can, if you have access to these synthesizers and you think of a sound and you think, oh, that would be cool in one of my tracks, then you can pull up a synthesizer, quickly get a brief idea of what you want to use, and then kind of move on from there. And then this demonstration is just kind of going over the fundamentals. Like every synth kind of has these very, like not basic, but these controls that you can use. So yeah, this is the basis of a pad. So I reckon we could probably make this sound even better. I'm going to bring this other filter in and get it to do some stuff. Maybe I'll use one of these envelopes to manipulate this filter. So what I'm doing now is like the same thing that I did with the amp envelope to change the volume. I'm now telling this envelope to change this part of the filter for me. So it's going to have like a slow attack. And then, as you can see, it kind of rides up, just like here. And then it like ducks down. And then goes back to its original point.
I have a question, like, what if you like the pad how you had it just before and how you've got it now? Would you save it, would you save two different ones, or would you automate when this second envelope comes on?
Save two different ones.
Okay.
That's a process, like, especially when I'm using a hardware synthesizer, or like it doesn't matter either way. Like you get to a certain point, it's like, okay, this is cool, save.
Yeah.
And then I normally put like V1, V2, V3, so you could have 10 different iterations of the same similar sound.
And do you think that that's a skill to master, as in quit while you're ahead sometimes? Because if you make too many changes and then you're like, oh, I didn't save it when I liked it and now I've ruined Christmas. How many controls these, like, is that a learning process as well of like when to get it saved? When's the version finished?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's also just your own, just your own idea of what you can do. Like if you feel like you've made almost like a breakthrough in your sound design, and you've tried this cool thing and it's worked, you're like, oh yeah, cool, save. Like sometimes I'll make a sound and I don't even save it because I never really enjoyed what I did just then. Like it doesn't, like I feel like you approach the sound design like you don't always need an outcome. You just need to do it and experiment and see what happens. Yeah. Ooh. Where is it starting from? You can record live. I don't understand the question. I can't read it.
I think Don is commenting on the electronic basis, but
Yeah.
I'm also curious about how you would apply some of the principles to recording acoustic instruments.
Yeah. I'm gonna so with these controls that are in this synthesizer are also in samplers. So when I move into some sampling, we're going to be using the exact same controls. So I just kind of wanted to go over these first, so everyone's got a bit of an idea.
So what you've got there on the table, not the computer, your like synth thing.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit? Maybe?
So yeah.
Yeah. So that's your actual synthesizer.
No. So this is just a controller that's also built by Ableton to control everything in Ableton. I've only got it here just in case I got stuck. I kind of wanted to do everything just purely on the laptop.
Yep.
Just because I feel like that's much more accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Stop you having to run it over. Cheers. Yeah, I'm pretty new to this, obviously,
Yeah.
but so I'm hearing the three like notes or phases or whatever. So is that one note that's going through each like envelope, or?
No. So I've got a 3-chord progression here, which I can bring up. So as these chords play, the synth is molding all of those all of those chords. So I'm trying to think of a better way to explain it. So let me press it. Let me press start.
Right. Okay.
So it's just playing some chords, and then whatever I change on here is going to change the overall sound. It's not like an individual note thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have explained that before. This is a chord progression that I put in before I started.
Yeah.
Because just purely out of convenience.
If you took like a recording of like the rain or something like you said about capturing sounds,
Yeah.
you could put that through a filter as well? Yeah.
Yep,
These are pretty pedestrian early questions.
No, yeah, no.
Yeah.
So at the moment I'm going to do synthesis, and then I'll move into a sampler, which kind of uses the same processes, but rather than generating a sound through an oscillator, you give it a sound to use.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Yeah, cool. Yeah, keep. I prefer the
Thanks,
questions,
Jez.
actually.
Can you just take us to the section where the MIDI notes are, like where those chords are that you've played?
Yep.
Okay, can you do that again?
Okay, yeah,
What button did you press? Where is it inside this maze?
Okay, so let me get completely out of it, and then I'll take you there. Okay, so the channel that we're using is, sorry. So the channel that we're using is called pad, and there's 2 sections for each channel. In this little cell, this is where I've created the loop, or the chord progression. And then down here, you have your 2 little tabs that can toggle between the chord progression and the synth.
Are you able to just quickly create those chords again so we can see the input of how you input that chord?
Yep. So I want to stay in the main, still use the same sound, and I just double click into this cell, and it's brought up the piano roll. And then just to make it bigger, I drag it up. I'm going to unpress that button just because it condenses it into the notes that you were going to use, that was used previously. And then I'm just drawing randomly in here. So there's a chord. Select them all, and then drag them out. So it defaults to a 1-bar loop, and then if you wanted to change the length, you just type in whatever you want. So you can type in 4, it makes it bigger. Type in 8, makes it even bigger. And then select them all again, drag them out to make it bigger. And then if you want to hear that back, you just hit the cell that you've just drawn into. You can also name these cells. So let's just call it new chord. And then you hit play.
So anything you have in that strip is controlled by that synthesis that you created?
Mm-hmm.
That was my question.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, what do you call what you just made, what you pressed up there?
Yep.
What do you, they've all got different, yeah, what's that called? What's that button that you just...
I would just call that a cell.
A cell, all right.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
So you call that a cell on that track, or a cell on that channel?
Yeah. Well, track and channel, well, you could use the same word for, like, you can use track and channel to describe one of these things. Everyone uses the same words. But whatever, hang on, like maybe let's make a brand new channel just to explain it even more. So, when I first started, we have 2 different types of channels, audio and MIDI. Because we're using an onboard synthesizer, we want a MIDI channel. So I'm going to double click and press Insert MIDI Track, Insert MIDI Channel. And then from here, you can drag in any instrument you like. So now I can drag in operator, which is a different type of synth. So now anything that I plug into these cells on this operator channel is going to be affected by the operator synthesizer. But to
And
make
so operator is a synthesizer that has like presets in it that operator is known for. Is
well,
that
you can choose presets if you want to. So if I go here, these are all different presets that have been made by the people who have created Ableton. But when you drag it in just as is, you're going to its pure default setting, almost like a clean plate, at which then you can go on and change it. Or if you like a preset, you can also drag the preset in. So let's say we drag in a bass sound. You can change this bass sound if you like. So you can either start from a clean slate, or you can start from somewhere someone's already started from. Like you've already got the building blocks there, and you can change it. Which is also, if you're just starting, that's a good way to start. Just pull in presets, see how they've got things set, and then just tweak it away, move it around, see what happens. Cool. Any other questions? No? Okay, cool. I was going to make a kick drum as well, but if we want to move into more sample-based stuff, then I think that we should do that.
Do you have a question? Thanks, Jess.
Just going to say, before we get into samples,
Yeah.
this concept you can use to just create a basic kind of like, drum and bass kind of, background to write from, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
So, well, it can be any genre. It's just like the way that I like to see it is you create sounds that you've made yourself in the way that you've like to make it, and then you then apply those sounds that only you've made. It might sound similar to someone else's, but like they're your sounds, and then you compose them within the DAW. So I would use, if I made a pad like this, like that could be your main building blocks for a track that you're going to make. So you can use like your chord progression, and then add a bass underneath that, or add drums, add percussion. Does that answer your question? No, all good. Okay. Benjamin, should we try and get it back up, or should we just keep running it like this? No.
I know that with Rye's practice, Rye uses a loop pedal, and with that loop pedal, I know that you'll sometimes lay down your own sound and then improvise over that. But you can also, you could build loops from your own original sounds that you then load into your loop pedal, so that when you're playing, you can have like a pre-arranged or pre-orchestrated track. So you might be using something like this to design that, and then you can bring it into your improvisational playing, for example.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So how I was going to try to do this was, we were going to make a sound using different types of synthesis and samples, and then slowly build an idea for a track from those things that we've made. And then explain synthesis as we go. So, let's try. I'm trying to get a gauge. Is there any part that everyone's like is? I feel like we need to go a bit more basic with Ableton. I feel like I've jumped in too deep. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of, get this part.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk about, okay, now let's work with a sample, like there's millions and millions and millions and millions of samples you could access online. But yeah, if you want to take your own. So I want to sample Jez going like, "Whoa." So I could take that sound and then apply all of these things to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then use that in my composition as if it was whatever. Put it to a rhythm that a hi-hat would normally play. So is that what you're about to explain of like when you sample, you got this one sound and then what?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Well, no. Hang on. I need... Like the idea that I'm trying to get across is you don't need to go online and download a bunch of samples that you don't like you might like the sound of, but I feel like when you make your own sounds and when you find your own sounds, you have a much better relationship with those sounds. And you know, the way that I feel about it is that like no one, like someone might, like there could be 100 other people that have that sample pack that you've bought online. But when you're making your own, only you have those sounds. And I think that's just a much better way to create the music that you like. You got a microphone?
Hello. If you download samples online, can you then manipulate them through this to make them, so like save as, say if you...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So what normally happens when you download... I could probably explain that. Do we have enough internet to download some samples? Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's not really where I was going to go, but if you want...
I guess the thing is that when you say you're creating sounds, for me, I think like go and recording sounds.
Yeah.
But so you're creating sounds from scratch, from within a program itself. Mm-hmm. So it's not the idea of, your idea of collecting sounds is not to physically go with a recorder and collect, but to build sounds up within the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that I just tweaked.
Okay.
Because I always think that creating sound or creating a sound library would be, for me, physically recording and then editing, you know, little bits. But yeah, but you're creating it from the ether within the program.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that, you know, having a mixture of the two, like having synthesized sounds or recorded sounds, like I think that's, like having both, or having access to both can really change your music.
Which is a lot like that track you played before where that artist had sampled and then brought the samples into Ableton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or like it doesn't, like that was quite an extreme example. Like if you're playing in a rock band, like you can still use samplers or Ableton or computers to kind of, I don't know, use those found sounds or those created sounds still in like your rock band configuration. Like it doesn't have to be just guitar, bass, and drums. Like you can introduce these type of things, and it makes you sound unique, I guess. And the same thing with like, I guess the one thing that I wanted to touch on as well, with like based on that band example, like when you're kind of trying to create, or when you're learning how to play, I think like also include like trying to, I'm just losing my train of thought here. Like really thinking about how you want your instrument to sound can make a huge difference. Like think about things like what guitar strings you want to use can make a difference to your sound. What type of guitar, if you're using pedals, you know, what order you're going to have those pedals in, because that also makes a huge difference. Like you're going to have, if you're using effects, having your delay effect after the reverb is going to sound way different to the other way around. Sorry, I keep hitting this. If you're a percussionist, like how do you tune your drums? There's heaps of different possibilities of how you tune your drum kit. So, like one thing that I kind of wanted, like because I like to make electronic sounds, I wanted to display, like kind of explain that through creating digital sounds. But if you go out and collect your own sounds and samples, you use this exact same method to manipulate those sounds. Like chopping, if you put it into a sampler, every sampler's got an envelope or an LFO that you can change. I think it just opens a whole new world of possibilities rather than just using normal traditional band instruments. A kick drum. Okay, so let's make a kick drum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag a synthesizer called Operator in, and this normally uses a synthesis method called FM synthesis or frequency modulation. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to click this fix button, which lets me control the frequency of this oscillator. Each one of these, A, B, C, D, is a different oscillator. Oh.
Frozen again.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so what frequency, like when we think about what does a kick drum need? So let's plug in some notes. This is I'm just going to plug in a basic 4/4 note, 4/4, and I'm going to hit play. So if I know that a kick drum, you kind of want to start with a frequency of about 50 hertz, because that's going to give you the bottom end of the kick drum. If I didn't know that, I would just go to Google and type in kick drum frequency, and then it would tell me everything. So let's start with here. And press play. So now this sounds way too muddy and way too rumbly for it to be a kick drum. So just like in the wavetable synthesizer when we're making the pad, we're going to use the envelope to kind of tell the sound how to behave. So as I pull down the decay, it's going to make more of a plucky, more of like a solid kick sound. And let's just put up the volume so we can hear it. With an FM synthesizer, the way it works is that there's an algorithm that tells the oscillators of how they're going to interact with each other, and these are different algorithms. So I'm going to choose this one, which means that they're not going to interact with each other in a direct way, just because we don't want to make anything too complex here. We're just making a simple kick drum. So press play again. And now I want to bring in a different frequency. So we've kind of got the bottom end of this kick, so now we kind of want to get that attack when you, so say when you're hitting the beater against the skin, that's what we're going to go for next. So this is going to be around the 85 to maybe 200 range. So as I slowly bring this in, we can slowly start to hear that that overtone or that extra note. I'm also going to add the same envelope just because we still want to get that kick type sound. So as I slowly bring this down, and there we go. Okay, so it still sounds a bit too static. So what I want to do is add a pitch envelope which mimics the sound when, like, so say when you've tuned a drum, it doesn't normally just go ba. It has a kind of like a duck or a rise in pitch. It kind of makes like a boom sound. So that's what this pitch envelope is going to do. So I click this little button to activate it, and it just gives it a bit more of a kick sound. And then you can keep going like with this as long as you like. So once you get to this point, it's really just a matter of personal taste. And then from here, so say when you're making electronic music, you really want to have like a whole library of kicks. So after I've created this, I hit save, and I can call this workshop kick. And now I can then use that in a composition later down the track. So that's kind of like that one of those steps I was explaining at the start, how you're kind of building up this bank of sounds that you can then use later down the track. Okay. So let's move away from synthesis. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag in a sampler. So this is where you can, if you've gone out and you've taken a recorder, this is where you can then pull in your samples to manipulate further, chop up. If you're like as another example, if you're a drummer, you could record some of your own drum beats, and then you can drag this into here, and you can change them, manipulate them however you like. Sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. So one thing that I was going to do for this part, I don't really want to do it anymore. I don't really know where to go from here now. I've lost myself.
Can we haul a sample in
Yeah.
into the sampler? You got any audio samples on there?
Yeah, I can go into here. One of my favorite things to do with this sampler is pull in some drum loops. So this is my collection of drum loops. I haven't made these personally. These are just things that I found online. And what I normally do is just like almost pick one at random. All right, that'll do. So you drag that into here. And now what you can do is you can play this sample any way you like. So if I'm just pressing the QWERTY keyboard, because the QWERTY keyboard is mapped to like a piano. So say for example, if I went into the cell, let me just quickly find the right. So you can plug in these notes. But we can go, so we can utilize the functions of this sampler. So what I want to do
Can I ask a pretty uneducated musical question? Just then you programmed specific parts of the beat to specific notes, is that correct?
So where it's...
I guess my question is more, are those notes, were they in the notes of, like in key of notes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in this classic mode here, you're just going to play the sample in the note that it's in when you press. So say if I had a keyboard here,
yeah,
and I pressed the C, it's going to play it in the key of C.
Cool. I guess my question was then, if you'd done that and then created those notes in that key, we'll say, or out of tune or whatever it happened to be, does that mean that if you just took the sample and dropped it in, that it is actually, just straight off the internet as it was, is that going to be in a specific key in a sense, or
Yeah.
is the beat? Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah, like if you pull a sample, like say if you've got a favorite track that you like,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I really like that drum break in that track.
Yeah. Hard.
What I would do is, well, you could find out the key of that track just by a search. But the idea is that like the sampler lets you maneuver that sound in any key, in any note that you like.
Yep.
So say even though you're writing a track in G, you can pull in a sample that isn't necessarily originally in G, but you can still move it around.
Awesome. Is there like obviously you can manipulate it as you showed us each note, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
But is there like an auto-tune thing where you could just say, oh, drop that Steve Miller beat in this track and then put it in G?
Yeah.
Is that sort of, so there is like an automated thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's pretty silly questions, but I don't know the
No,
answers.
it's no silly questions.
Thanks.
But yeah, so I can take it even further. So say this. So this is the original key of this sample. Oh no, it's not the original key. But say this is just in C. If I press play, in this piano roll, it's only going to... Where's it gone? It's only going to play the sample for that amount of time. If I drag the sample out even longer, it's going to play it for a longer bit of time. Yeah, and then I can move it. Ooh. Move it up, move them over. Yeah.
So, if you weren't using a drum kit and you were using a sample that is more like, because maybe it's a nuance, people won't know that a drum kit can be tuned, or that drums are tuned, or that it's tuned to a different key than you're using it. So if you're using a sample that was more obviously pitched and you change it in here, does that affect, like, how does that affect the quality of the sound? Like, can you give us a bad example? Like, if you bring in a vocal or something that's obviously pitched and then you try and change it, what happens?
Okay. Let me try to find something. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I can find a vocal one. I'm going to try to find something that's... Yeah, for sure. I can do it if you like. So, just for this example, I'm just going to use the laptop microphone because I don't have an interface or anything. I just wanted to leave it all on the laptop. So I'm just going to quickly set the preferences so that the program is going to take input from the laptop microphone. So, and then I open a new audio track. I press ARM. And now I can record my voice. Hello, hey, 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 hey. And now if I play that back, that should work. Hello. There it was. Maybe I need to not use the microphone.
Or extend the sample size out.
Yeah.
So only play that
Just
feedback.
record it again. I think it's just getting a bit of feedback because there's a lot of stuff. Hello, hey, hey, one.
So when you're recording, if you have headphones on, you hear yourself coming through. In this instance, that is our sound system, which is why we're getting the loop.
Yeah. 2. Hello, hey, hey, 1, 2, 2. Hello, hey, hey, 1, 2, 2. Hello. Alright, and now I'm going to turn this off because it keeps inducing feedback. Okay, so now let's drag this sample that we've just made into here. Hello, hey, hey, 1, 2, 2. Let's give it a bit of volume. Hello, hey, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2.
That's cool. Can you show us on the piano keyboard where you're dragging?
Because when you record that, like, it's not mapped to the piano roll, so it's not like in the key of C. It's just a vocal sample. So what happens? Like, it hasn't been pitched by the piano roll, and then as soon as you click what, like, where does it put the reference point of the beginning pitch?
C1.
So no matter what you've recorded, it's always C1.
That's going to be the original key or the
Mhm.
original sound. So, for an example. Oop. I'm just going to make this a bit longer. So this should be the original sample. Hello, hey, hey, 1, 2, 2. Hello, hey, hey, 1, 2, 2. And then I can move that around. Hello, hey, hey. Oop. So if I bring it down here, it should be different, I hope. Hello. Oh. Pause that. Play this. So that's a really low example. So as you can, it's also slowed it down the lower that you've gone in pitch. And when you go higher in pitch, it's going to make it way faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly like a 10-tail. Yeah.
One, two, two.
So we're still just in the classic mode of this sampler. When you go into slice mode, this becomes more like an MPC where you can slice and then trigger using the pads. So now what you can do is choose different points of this sample and give it a note on the keyboard of where you want it to trigger. So let me just go back to C1. Two. So now you can make these kind of really interesting rhythms, and you now turn your voice into a percussive instrument. So I can add a few more slices in here. I'll bring it back a little bit. So now I can go back into my piano roll, go back to C1, and then now this is where you can create a rhythm. What I just did there is I just changed the layout so it's into eighth notes. So this is just a 4/4. I don't know how this is going to sound, but this is just an example of what you can do. This is probably the same example as what Max Huber did with his raindrops. And then you can go even further from here and you can add a filter. You can go into here and you can change the pitch.
You talked about swapping a mode there. Like, what was how did you swap that mode where you were able to then use the triggers? You went from classic to trigger mode, is that right?
Yeah, so that's just a function of this sampler. So classic mode is where you can change the pitch of the sample in the piano roll, but it's always going to play the entirety of the sample for the length of time that you're holding the key for. So if you only hold it for a second, you're only going to get a second of the sample. If you hold it for 10 seconds, you're going to get 10 seconds of the sample. and you can move it up and down the piano roll. And that's like, I probably use, if I had some violins or something that I had sampled, I would use this classic mode, because then you can play chords and you'll get essentially get like a violin quartet or something. Whereas slice is more like an MPC style, making up percussion type of elements. And then again, you can save that. Like say, like you've got a whole like a drum break that you've chopped up that you like. It's like, okay, that's cool. Save that. Use that later. Or you've got your raindrops that you've made into a rhythm. You can save that. Use it later. Like anything is possible with any sample. You can do anything.
So when you go to that splice mode and you've got all those blue lines chopping it up, those ones down the bottom, do they align themselves to the QWERTY keyboard, as in like from left to right, it goes from left to right on the thing?
Yep.
And you can just adjust the parameter of the blue line as to the length of that spliced bit.
So the blue line, so you're right, so the very first blue line of this is C1, because that's where it's always going to refer to. The blue line represents where that note is going to trigger, like where on that sample is the note going to trigger. So as an example, I'll open a new cell. This normally works better with percussion, but we'll do it anyway. We'll do this one. If I just create... Going all the way to the top. It's then going to play these all in sequence, because we've just gone in sequence. And that works really well with if you want to chop up a drum break, because you can choose all the different beats of the drum loop, and then you can then move them around on this piano roll. So you could say move this around to here, and then you can just make your own beat out of someone else's beat. Okay. So all my next parts I had, we've kind of... Do you have a question, Jez?
No.
Oh. Okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to go over with samples. I kind of I wanted to move into like file management and naming conventions, but I've kind of spoken about that already. So now that we've spent time creating our sounds, we've got a whole library and ready to use them. The way that I like to approach music, or when I'm trying to use sample selection to create a song, is the frequency spectrum, because you've only got a certain amount of frequency range for you to fit everything into your song. So I'm just going to bring in a frequency analyzer just to explain what I'm saying. So the human ear can listen to about from 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz. This is all you've got in terms of choosing your sounds. If you can write a song and you've got all your sounds in separate frequencies, it's already going to be so much easier for your mixing engineer or your mastering engineer to make everything sound really separated. For example, if you sing in the same key or the same frequency as your guitar, they're already clashing really, really badly. And it's going to take way more, like it's going to take a lot of effort to separate those sounds in order to have a good recording or a good output. And the same thing goes with choosing your own sounds. Like if I've already taken up a lot of the low end with a bass sound, I'm not going to choose a sample that's too heavy in the bass frequencies. Bass frequencies is from, I don't know, anywhere from 80 hertz up to maybe 250, a bit below that. So I think that's something that's quite, like I've personally overlooked that for a long time when I first started making music. And I really found that once I kind of figured it out, like your mixing not only is much easier, but I think your overall song as a whole just sounds much more complete, and you can kind of separate each element when you're listening to it. So yeah, I kind of wanted to, and I think that's all I have to say.
Can you play some of those things so we can see which, like, where the kick drum fits in with this spectrum analyzer, and maybe where that voice crazy sample one fits in? Thank you.
So we're obviously so this is where the kick drum's sitting, and we started off like the first oscillator was in the 50 hertz region, so that's where we're going to get most of the frequency. Let me try to bring something else in. So now you can see that we're getting way more peaks up in the other region. So the aim with, like, when I'm trying to mix a song, I kind of want to see a relatively flat frequency spectrum, because you know that everything is balanced. There's nothing that's like too, unless you want something to be more pronounced, but you really want it to be kind of relatively flat.
So on that frequency analyzer, what does the axis on the left mean, and what does the axis along the top mean?
So the top is hertz to kilohertz, which is like the frequency, and then this is your decibel range.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's just a very important part of song making that I kind of just overlooked for way too long, and I thought that it was good information to pass on.
Could you show us one of your more developed sessions and plug it through the frequency majiggy?
Yeah. Maybe this one.
So even though you haven't saved that session, all the samples you would have created in that session would be saved?
Not unless you directly saved it. If you saved the session as a whole, you would keep everything. But if you just hit don't save, then you wouldn't have kept anything. But then in each individual sampler or synth, if you had saved during your session, then you would have kept it all.
Yeah, cool.
So hopefully this is mixed well. 'Cause then, let me just get this up. I just moved to a part where everything's going on.
Then the deal's, in my case,
Oh. So I haven't messed around with this for a while.
then the deals. In my case, I didn't want money. I wanted authority. So I asked the...
I've just got some things turned off in here that I've forgotten about. There we go.
Didn't want to go. Then the deals. In my case, I didn't want money. I wanted authority. So I asked the impossible, hoping to be left alone.
So, looking at this, I don't think I've mixed it very well at the moment. Like it's relatively flat, but I think I could still utilize some sections in here and boost those up. And I think the bass is probably a bit too hard as well.
Do you normally find yourself boosting stuff or reducing stuff, or does it depend on what you're working on?
I find that probably reducing, I would say. Yeah, but it does depend. It all depends on what samples that I've used at that time. But for this one in particular, like I've recorded these sections in from my drum machine. I haven't used the Ableton drum rack, so these are all hi-hats that I've programmed on a separate machine.
All the color codes, different songs?
No, so this is one song. I can give you a brief tour. So I like to have everything really organized and color-coded. So this channel here is a MIDI channel for my external synthesizer. So all the MIDI that I program into these cells sends to my synth. So when I'm recording the track, I can spend more time actually live tweaking and live recording in what I'm doing on the synthesizer. Over here is all the drums. So, for example, these are all samples that I've recorded. So, like clicks. I think for this one I just threw stones on the ground.
Can you place that Stones loop?
Yeah.
When you honestly didn't want.
And then this one. So that click would have been just like, I think I was like turning off a light switch, but I've tuned it down in the simpler and made more of like a kind of plucky sound.
What did you record it?
Sometimes I use my iPhone, or I think at that time I had a Zoom recorder. Yeah, most of the time I just use my iPhone because I feel like you can get pretty good results. And you can also, like, if you're going to change and manipulate the sample anyway, like, it doesn't have to, yeah, sorry, you go.
When you record a sound with your iPhone, is there a certain app that you use to save it as a format? Because when I used to use just a voice memo, it would save as a file that was like impossible to email and get off my phone.
Yeah, I think they use AIFF files. I convert it to MP3 or convert it to WAV in here. So when you drop it into Ableton automatically converts it when you drop it into a sampler.
Okay. So how do you, I don't use iPhone, but how do you get it off your iPhone into your laptop?
Personally, I just airdrop it because I use a Mac as well.
Okay.
Alternatively, you can, I think if you're using a PC, you can still access your voice memos through the file structure. Yeah. Or you can, but you had a hard time emailing it as well.
Yeah, when I had an iPhone, it would save as like M4A or something that wasn't like a usable audio clip.
Yeah.
And I wondered if there was an app that you used in your iPhone that just saved it as an MP3 or saved it as whatever file, like WAV file or something.
Yeah. No, I just use the voice recordings, but there are plenty of different apps that you can use. You can also get little microphones that you can plug into your phone. You can put like little little microphone covers like pop filters and stuff on there. Or like handheld recorders is also a really good option. They just save onto an SD card and you can, yeah, there's one. Yeah, if you use a handheld recorder, you can already, like you can design a file structure within the device so that it's already all labeled and you can just whack it straight into your computer. Yeah, things like that. You can use what you have to get good quality recordings, and then you can manipulate those.
And I have another question. So, yeah, talking with different sound engineer people, sometimes, well, it's like, how do you train your ear? Like when you're talking with musicians, there are ear training exercises and there's ear training like software and different things you can use so that you recognize certain things and can like integrate certain knowledges. So is there anything like that that you've used to become better and able to, you know, skip that Googling process of like, what is the frequency of blah, blah, blah? Like, is there, what have you done to like train your ear so that you can accelerate your workflow?
By making a lot of mistakes, I guess. I do just a lot of experimenting. I think just over time you learn to recognize that things are sounding really muddy or things aren't, like that doesn't sound quite right, or, you know, you can, like I haven't really personally used any exercises. But I also work in live sound, so like just doing that in a professional way kind of has accelerated my ear training just because that's part of the job. But like there are a lot of exercises that you can use to help you identify frequencies and identify things that you learn how to hear non-desirable parts of your track, and then you learn techniques of how to avoid that, such as sample selection or moving it around in the key. Like all of these different parts help you like make a more cohesive song. But to answer your question, I haven't personally used anything like that. Cool.
One last question, maybe?
Yeah.
Coming back to, you mentioned before that you're a guitarist. When you're bringing acoustic instruments in, how do you mesh them with this sort of DAW space, and how do you affect your recordings of acoustic instruments outside of clip creation, but more in shaping sound as part of a home recording setup?
I tend to do, well, for my own personal workflow, I prefer to record everything in quite dry because I know that I'm going to use a lot of effects and instruments and EQs within the program. But things such as like mic placement, you know, even going down to what type of, like how long have you had your strings on for, like that's going to affect your recording a lot. Or how fresh are your strings. But I tend to just record everything in quite dry, like with no real EQ, like really quite flat EQs, because I just know that I'm gonna do a lot within the program. Yeah.
Cool. And Jez has just sent out a resource which we can email out after, which is an ear training clip. So yeah, we can shoot that over after as well. And maybe we can even send some people like the Finding a Sound Ableton blank session file as an idea. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone last questions before we wrap up, everyone? Yo.
Can you show us the effects you put on your sounds, like for processing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So just using this one, this session. So let me group all of these up. By grouping it allows me just to turn everything off all at the same time, so you can A-B it really easily. A-B it means like listen to it really dry, listen to it really wet. So if I solo it, this is what these stones sound like. Oop. So that's it normally, and that's it with these effects. So I've just put a high pass filter on, a saturator, this resonator effect, which makes it, you can kind of change the overtones of a sound, and then I've just boosted a little bit in the highs for just to get a bit more clarity. I'll try to see if I can get a better example. So it's mostly just, like when I'm mixing, I tend to just mainly stick with saturation, compression, and EQ. I normally leave I'll leave like big effects up to when I'm actually like designing sounds with synths and stuff. Where's something where I've gone quite crazy? So, also these effects chains, they're going from left to right. So the signal is going to go through the filter first, then the saturator, then the EQ. And when you move these around, you can move these around, that's going to change the effect of the sound. And it's all up to personal preference of what you think sounds better. A lot of the time, if I do an EQ then a compress, if I EQ something then compress it, I'll often just quickly swap it around to see if it sounds better. A lot of people say there's like certain rules. I don't think there's any rules. Like if it sounds good one way, then I think just go for it. But yeah, this track is mostly just EQs, saturation, and compression. This is a third-party plugin called Carver, which adds or decreases transients. Like it's kind of like using an envelope to get rid of the attack. But yeah, I don't really have like a particular set of rules that I reach for every time. It's just, yeah, putting in things that I know quite well, and then moving them around and seeing what works. But yeah. Does that answer your question? I can try to find another example for you if you like.
Big thank you to Benny, I reckon. Heaps of topics there that I reckon could have had entire sessions all to themselves. So we'd love to hear some of that feedback. So if there are particular focus areas people would like to hear, shoot it through to us and we can work that into some future sessions.
Yeah, more than happy to answer any questions as well later down the track.
We have a bit of a mailing list for the A Song Like Alice workshops, where you can send things out to other people on the mailing list. So if you do kind of find useful tools or inspiring things or opportunities coming up for people in the music industry, you can share them around that. So I'll add you all on. If you don't want to be there, just unsubscribe. But a big thank you to everyone for coming down tonight on a Monday. And I just want to say a big thank you again to Benny. This was probably his first big workshop, and really great to share some of that knowledge you have in sound design. So big thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
And last request, do you want to play one of your tracks that you've published that we can listen to on the way out?
Sure.
Cool. This is a Song Like Alice workshop, and keep your ear peeled for more. Thank you. Ears, plural, maybe.